My brother proposed to my fiancé at family party. When I reacted, Mom called me cruel, and what happened next left them beg me in tears and regret. I, a 32-year-old male, never thought I'd be writing one of these Reddit posts, but I need to get this off my chest before I lose my mind. Some background first. I grew up in Michigan, the oldest of 3 kids. I worked hard through school, got into Michigan State for computer engineering, and landed a solid tech job in Chicago after graduation. I built a career there for almost a decade before taking a higher-paying remote position that let me move back to my hometown in Michigan 2 years ago. The money was too good to pass up, a $45,000 salary bump plus stock options that are already worth another $30,000. My younger brother Nate, a 29-year-old male, has always been my mother's favorite, not in subtle ways either. She's blatant about it. While I had to work summer jobs to afford my first car, Nate got his handed to him for his 18th birthday. When I needed help with college tuition, I got lectures about financial responsibility. When Nate wanted to start a business, a food truck selling overpriced tacos that failed spectacularly in 8 months and cost my parents $85,000, my parents drained their savings to fund it. The pattern was set early. When we were kids, I'd get grounded for leaving my bike out in the rain. When Nate crashed his bike into our neighbor's garden and destroyed $500 worth of exotic plants, my mom blamed the neighbor for planting too close to the sidewalk. I still remember her writing that check with a martyred expression, then taking Nate for ice cream afterward to cheer him up from the trauma. Don't get me wrong, I built my own life and did well for myself, a senior software architect making 6 figures, with a nice condo. I've put most of the family nonsense behind me. My sister, Caddy, a 27-year-old female, gets it. She's a nurse who paid her own way through school while dealing with the same favoritism I did. She worked night shifts at a 24-hour diner throughout nursing school, coming home to study at 4 in the morning while Nate was sleeping off parties in our parents' basement. Caddy and I have a standing monthly video call to vent about family drama. These sessions usually end with us making bets on Nate's next catastrophic life decision. Last month I won $50 when I predicted he'd try to become a day trader after watching a YouTube video about it. He lost $3,000 in 2 days. My best friend, Derek, a 32-year-old male, has been in my corner since we were 12. We met in middle school when he called out a teacher who gave me detention for something I didn't do. Derek noticed Nate had actually been the one throwing paper airplanes but blamed me when caught. Derek stood up, pointed at Nate, and said, "It was that kid. Brody's just covering for him because that's what he always does." Derek got detention too, but we've been inseparable since. Derek's got this razor-sharp sarcasm that cuts through nonsense faster than anything. He works as a mechanical engineer for a defense contractor and never hesitates to point out when someone's being an idiot, especially when it comes to my family. He's been telling me for years that I should stop trying to win my parents' approval. I should have listened sooner. Derek meets me for basketball every Saturday morning, where we destroy college kids half our age through pure strategy and dirty tricks. He calls it old man ball. Fewer jump shots, more elbows and trash talk. The real competition is our post-game debate on which of our families is more dysfunctional. His dad left when he was 8, and his mom cycled through boyfriends like seasonal wardrobes, so it's usually a close contest. About a year after moving back, I met Allison, a 30-year-old female, at a local tech meetup downtown. She was presenting on digital marketing strategies for business-to-business clients. Smart as hell, takes no nonsense from anyone, and has a dry sense of humor that kills me. She dropped 3 perfect Star Wars references during her presentation, so I had to introduce myself afterward. We hit it off immediately. 6 months in, things got serious. Allison grew up with 4 brothers in a house where directness was valued above politeness. When she first met Derek, they spent 2 hours arguing about the technical feasibility of lightsabers, while I just watched in amusement. She has a black belt in jiu-jitsu that she earned after some creep followed her home from college one night. She's not someone you mess with, which makes what happened later even more insane. I didn't mention Allison to my family right away. Given our history, I keep my personal life separate from family stuff until I'm sure about things. By Christmas, I decided it was time for them to meet her. I figured, what could go wrong? That's when everything imploded. I showed my parents pictures of Allison, and when Nate saw her, he completely lost it, shouting about how I was a jerk for dating his ex. I had no clue they even knew each other, let alone dated. Apparently, Nate and Allison had gone on a few casual dates 3 months before I met her. According to him, it was some intense relationship that she ended abruptly. He pulled the classic Nate move, dramatically stomping upstairs and slamming his bedroom door like he was 14, not 29. My mom immediately gave me that disappointed look she'd perfected over the years. I asked Allison about it later, and she told me the truth. They went on exactly 3 dates, and she broke it off when he started acting possessive after barely knowing her. On their 3rd date, He suggested she meet his parents and talked about a weekend trip to Chicago. When she said things were moving too fast, he showed up at her workplace with flowers the next day. That was the final straw. I refused to end things with Allison over this nonsense. Nate kept bringing it up for weeks, telling everyone who would listen that I stole his girlfriend. My mom started making passive-aggressive comments about family loyalty whenever Allison's name came up. Eventually, Nate stopped mentioning it, and I thought we could all move on. I was dead wrong. Fast forward to this summer. Allison and I had been together for about 15 months, and I knew she was the one. I planned an elaborate proposal for her birthday, rented a private room at her favorite restaurant, invited both our families and close friends, and spent 3 months' salary on the perfect ring. The proposal went perfectly. She said yes. Everyone cheered. It was one of the best nights of my life. Well, almost everyone cheered. Nate stormed out during the applause, with my mother following him like he was a toddler having a tantrum. On her way out, she glared at me as if I'd proposed specifically to ruin Nate's evening. My dad just shrugged apologetically and stayed for the celebration. Later that night, Derek pulled me aside and said, "Your mom literally chased after a 29-year-old man who was throwing a fit about someone else getting engaged. Think about how insane that is." When he put it that way, it was both hilarious and disturbing. Nate was quiet for about 2 months after that. He barely spoke to me, which was fine by me. Then, out of nowhere, he invited Allison and me to dinner at his place with my parents and sister, saying he wanted to clear the air before the wedding. Since my parents and Caddy would be there as buffers, we accepted. Caddy texted me beforehand, suspicious timing. "Want me to bring my taser?" I thought she was joking. Turns out, we should have been even more prepared. Dinner was tense but uneventful. My mom kept asking Allison pointed questions about her family and career goals, with the subtle implication that marketing wasn't a serious profession like Nate's perpetual entrepreneurship. Allison handled it like a pro, even complimenting my mom on her hideous new haircut with a completely straight face. Afterward, we all moved to the living room for coffee. About half an hour into the conversation, Nate stood up and said he had an important announcement. He launched into a long dramatic speech about how happy he was to have everyone there for his special moment. Then, and I still can't believe this, he got down on one knee, pulled out a ring box and proposed to my fiancé. The room went dead silent. Allison looked horrified and told him to put the ring away and get up. My dad tried to step in, but I was already across the room. I grabbed Nate by his shirt collar and punched him square in the jaw. He fell back, knocking over the coffee table. As my dad pulled me off him, Nate started spewing some delusional nonsense about how Allison was only with me to get back at him for dumping her, and this proved she didn't really love me. My mom was screaming at me for hitting her precious boy, completely ignoring what he had just done. Caddy managed to get Allison and me out of there before things got worse. In the car, Allison was furious. She couldn't believe Nate would pull something like that, especially in front of our families. When we got home, I checked the damage to my hand. Nothing broken, just bruised knuckles, while Allison paced the kitchen. I went on 3 dates with him. Brody, 3. And he does this a year and a half later. Who does that? I had no answer. Logic doesn't apply to Nate's world. It's been a week since then, and I'm still seeing red. My parents have been blowing up my phone, mostly defending Nate and saying I overreacted. My mom even had the audacity to suggest I apologize to him for punching him. "He's sensitive and was just expressing his feelings," she texted. Violence is never the answer. I texted back, "Neither is proposing to your brother's fiancé." I finally decided to confront Nate directly. I called him and insisted Allison be present for the conversation. He surprisingly agreed, and we met at my place the following weekend. Missouri. When Nate arrived, he looked rough. He sat silently for a few minutes before I broke the ice by asking him to explain himself. "Look, it's not what you think," he started. I was trying to prove a point. "What point could possibly justify proposing to my fiancé?" I demanded. He explained that he'd been talking to his buddy Craig about Allison and me. Craig had put it in his head that Allison only started dating me as revenge for Nate rejecting her. They cooked up this test to see if she would leave me for Nate when given the chance. If you're wondering who Craig is, he's Nate's equally delusional friend from college. He's the guy who convinced Nate that cryptocurrency was a guaranteed investment right before the market crashed. He's also the marketing expert who designed the logo for Nate's food truck, a cartoon taco that looked disturbingly anatomical. Their combined IQ barely reaches room temperature. Craig said if she was using you to get back at me, she'd either say yes to my proposal or at least be flattered by it, Nate explained. The fact that she was disgusted proved she might actually love you. Allison was livid. "So you humiliated all of us to prove a point? You realize how insane that is, right?" Nate shrugged. "I had to know for sure." Craig said. "Craig's a 30-year-old who lives in his mom's basement," I interrupted. "Maybe don't take relationship advice from him. The conversation went downhill from there. Nate maintained that he was justified in his actions because brothers before hoes, his actual words. He said if the situation were reversed, he would have respected the code and backed off. I knew that was complete nonsense. Before leaving, Nate declared he wouldn't attend our wedding. I can't support this marriage knowing I had her first. 3 dates isn't having someone first, you idiot, I told him. And don't worry, your invitation was already in the shredder. After he left, I called my parents to explain what happened. My dad seemed to understand the situation, but my mom was still making excuses for Nate's behavior, calling it a misunderstanding and suggesting we were being too harsh on him. He's always been sensitive, and he really liked Allison. You should have checked with him before you started dating her, she said. We went on 3 dates a year and a half ago, Allison said loud enough for my mom to hear over the phone. I barely knew him. My mom hung up after that. Caddy called later to say she was fully on our side and thought Nate's behavior was inexcusable. I've been saying it for years, Mom created a monster. Good luck getting her to see it though. For now, I decided to go low contact with Nate and my parents. Allison and I focused on moving forward with wedding planning, though the family drama was casting a shadow over what should have been a happy time. That weekend, Derek came over with pizza and his PlayStation. Wedding planning break, he declared. You need to shoot some virtual bad guys instead of your actual brother. He wasn't wrong. About a month later, the situation exploded again at my sister Caddy's promotion celebration dinner. My parents hosted it at their house, and Nate was conveniently busy that evening. Caddy had recently been promoted to charge nurse in the ER. During dinner, Caddy mentioned her upcoming trip to Europe and then casually said, "Brody, I know Nate's uninvited from your wedding, but you'd be cool with him coming to my birthday party next month, right?" I laughed it off and told her it was her party, her guest list. My mom, who had been silently fuming all night, suddenly snapped. "Is Nate really still uninvited to your wedding? I thought you were just being dramatic." I confirmed that yes, he was still uninvited. She started ranting about how I was being childish and holding grudges. I reminded her that Nate and I had mutually agreed he wouldn't attend. She accused me of trying to divide the family and said I was jealous of Nate's charisma. What charisma? The guy wears graphic tees with crypto slogans and hasn't had a real job since college. His idea of witty conversation is quoting Joe Rogan podcasts. But in my mom's eyes, he's George Clooney, and Elon Musk rolled into one. I bit my tongue and told her this wasn't the time or place to discuss it. We were there to celebrate Caddy. My mom stormed off to the kitchen, and the rest of the night was awkwardly silent. My dad tried to salvage the evening by asking Caddy detailed questions about her new role, but the damage was done. 3 days later, my mom showed up at my house unannounced. Allison was working from home, and I had just gotten back from a meeting. Mom barged in without waiting for an invitation and demanded we settle this Nate situation once and for all. She launched into a bizarre lecture about how I should be secure enough in my relationship not to worry about Nate's harmless prank, her words for the proposal. She said uninviting him was cruel and petty, and that I needed to be the bigger person. I told her again that Nate and I had both agreed he shouldn't come. If she had an issue with it, she should talk to him. This led to a shouting match where she finally dropped the bomb. "If Nate's not welcome, then I'm not coming either." "That's your choice," I replied calmly. "I'm not going to beg you to be at my wedding." She looked shocked, like she expected me to cave immediately. "You would really be okay with your mother missing your wedding? Wouldn't be the first important event of mine you've missed because of Nate, would it?" That hit home. She'd skipped my college graduation because Nate had a minor cold. She missed my first professional awards ceremony because it was the same night as Nate's community theater performance. He played tree number 3 and had no lines. She called me cruel and stormed out. Within hours, my phone was blowing up with texts and calls from her side of the family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all telling me I was being unreasonable and needed to respect my mother. My dad called privately later that evening. "Son, I think your mother is wrong on this one. Nate was out of line, and actions have consequences. I'll be at your wedding regardless of what she decides." This was the first time my dad had openly disagreed with my mom about Nate. I was genuinely surprised. Maybe he was finally growing a spine after 35 years of marriage. Meanwhile, Nate started posting cryptic social media updates about family betrayal and blood means nothing anymore. My mom commented supportive things on all his posts, further fueling the drama. He even created a public playlist called Songs for Traitors that was mostly whiny emo tracks from 2005. Allison was caught in the middle. My mom had been texting her directly, trying to guilt her into convincing me to change my mind. When Allison didn't respond, my mom started spreading rumors that Allison was controlling me and turning me against my family. For now, most of my mom's family was boycotting the wedding, while my dad's side was still planning to attend. Caddy reaffirmed she was coming regardless of the drama. We decided to downsize the wedding since our guest list had been nearly cut in half. The silver lining, we saved almost $15,000 on the venue and catering, which we put toward a nicer honeymoon in New Zealand. 2 weeks after the wedding boycott began, my mom showed up at our house unannounced again. Allison texted me at work, saying my mom was at the door asking to talk. I told Allison I'd be home in 20 minutes and to let her in if she felt comfortable doing so. When I arrived, they were sitting at the dining table. My mom had barely touched the coffee Allison had made her. The tension in the room was palpable. My mom started with what seemed like an olive branch. I've been thinking about everything, and I want to clear the air. Family is too important to let this drive us apart. For a brief moment, I thought she might actually apologize. Instead, she turned to Allison and said, "I was hoping to catch you alone today. I think without Brody's influence, you'd see reason about this Nate situation." Allison calmly replied, "With all due respect, I wouldn't discuss this without Brody present. This involves his brother and his family." My mom's face darkened. "So you need permission to speak now? I thought you were supposed to be independent." I stepped in. "Mom, that's enough. If you came here to insult Allison, you can leave right now." She ignored me and continued addressing Allison. "You know, before you came along, our family was perfectly fine. Now suddenly, Brody thinks he's too good for us. I wonder where he got that idea." "Before I came along," Allison replied with impressive restraint. "Brody was already a successful professional who'd built his own life despite, not because of, his family support." Allison stood up. "I think you should go. We can talk when everyone's calmer." That's when my mom completely lost it. As Allison was walking toward the door, my mom grabbed her by the hair and yanked her backward. Allison stumbled and fell, and my mom was on top of her in seconds, screaming incoherently and trying to scratch her face. I pulled my mom off and physically removed her from the house. She kept pounding on the door for nearly 10 minutes before finally leaving. Allison was shaken but thankfully not seriously hurt. Some scratches, a bruised arm, and a small patch of hair pulled out. I immediately called my dad and Caddy to tell them what happened. My dad was shocked but still tried to make excuses. "Your mother's been under a lot of stress lately." "So have I replied. "Somehow, I've managed not to assault anyone." Caddy, who's seen plenty of domestic violence cases as a nurse, came over immediately to check on Allison and strongly encouraged us to file a police report. "This isn't normal family conflict," she insisted. "This is assault." Allison was reluctant to involve the police, but agreed to file a report after we explained why having an official record might be important if things escalated further. The responding officers explained that even without Allison pressing charges, the case could still be pursued based on the evidence. They also suggested we consider a restraining order. One of the officers pulled me aside when Allison was giving her statement. "Look, I deal with family disputes all the time. This isn't normal heated argument territory. Your mother crossed a serious line." He handed me a card for a family law attorney who specialized in restraining orders. Throughout all this, Nate was surprisingly absent from the drama. I texted him to let him know what happened, and his only response was, "That's messed up, sorry." No defense of our mom, no attempt to shift blame, just a simple acknowledgement that she had crossed a line. I called Derek after everything went down. He drove over with food from our favorite burger joint and listened to the whole story. After I finished, he just shook his head. "Dude, I've been telling you for 15 years your mom's nuts. Maybe now you'll actually believe me." He helped me draft a no-contact email to my mother. The email was short and to the point. "After your physical attack on Allison, I'm cutting contact. Do not come to our home. Do not contact us by phone, email, or through third parties. Any future communication will be through our attorney. This is non-negotiable." I blocked my mom on every platform and told my dad I wouldn't be speaking to her again until she got professional help and offered a genuine apology to Allison. We started seriously discussing moving out of state after the wedding. Allison had been offered a position at her company's Atlanta office, and my job was remote anyway. A fresh start 600 miles away from this toxic family environment sounded pretty good. The next day, Allison and I went to the courthouse and filed for a temporary restraining order against my mother. The judge granted it immediately based on the police report and photos. My mother was legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of us or our home for the next 90 days. What I haven't mentioned yet is the financial aspect of all this family drama. 5 years ago, my grandfather passed away and left a substantial inheritance to be split among his 3 grandchildren, me, Nate, and Caddy. My parents were named as trustees until we either turned 30 or got married, whichever came first. My grandfather was a shrewd businessman who built a chain of hardware stores across the Midwest. He sold the business for 8 figures a few years before he died. Each of us grandkids was supposed to receive about $450,000, plus proceeds from some investment properties he owned. I never saw much of that money. Whenever I asked about it, my parents had excuses about why it couldn't be accessed or claimed. Most of it went to family expenses. Caddy had the same experience. After the assault incident, I started looking more closely at the trust situation. I requested bank statements and transaction records, which my parents were legally required to provide as trustees. What I found was infuriating but not surprising. They had been systematically using trust funds, primarily my share and Caddy's, to support Nate's lifestyle and failed business ventures. His apartment $2,300 monthly rent, paid for with trust money. His car, a $42,000 SUV bought outright with trust money. His failed food truck business, $85,000 from the trust. His custom gaming PC, $5,500 from the trust. Meanwhile, I'd received exactly $15,000 for education expenses, and Caddy had gotten $12,000 over 5 years from a trust that should have provided each of us with nearly $500,000. The paper trail was damning. Automatic transfers from the trust account to Nate's personal checking account, $4,000 monthly for living expenses. Regular payments to his credit cards, his car insurance, his cell phone, his streaming subscriptions, even his dating app premium memberships. I consulted with an attorney who specialized in estate law. He confirmed what I suspected. My parents had breached their fiduciary duty as trustees by clearly favoring one beneficiary over the others, and using the trust for purposes not intended by my grandfather. With Caddy's full support, I filed a civil suit against my parents for breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, and violation of the trust terms. The documentation was irrefutable. Bank transfers, credit card statements, rental agreements, all showing exactly where the money had gone. When the lawsuit papers were served, all hell broke loose. My dad called, panic evident in his voice. "Brody, we need to talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding." "The bank records are pretty clear, Dad," I replied. "No misunderstanding." My mom got on the line, suddenly sweet as honey. "Sweetheart, we always intended to repay that money. We were just helping your brother through a rough patch." "A 5-year rough patch?" I asked. "Besides, it wasn't your money to lend. It was specifically left to us by Grandpa." The civil lawsuit proved to be a tactical nuclear option. My lawyer, a former prosecutor who specialized in financial crimes, treated the case like a personal crusade. He uncovered that my parents had not only misappropriated funds, but had also doctored some of the annual trust reports they were legally required to file. The lawsuit hit them hard financially. Their assets were temporarily frozen while the case proceeded, which meant they couldn't continue supporting Nate. Their credit score tanked once the court case became public record. My dad, who'd been planning to retire next year, had to shove those plans indefinitely. My mom had to go back to work as a receptionist at a dentist's office, a job she considers beneath her. They had to withdraw from their country club because they couldn't afford the fees anymore. The entire situation became quietly known in their social circle. Nobody said anything directly, but they stopped getting invited to the fancy dinner parties they used to brag about. Turns out, embezzling from your own kids doesn't make you popular with the other golf club parents. Nate's rent came due, his car payment was late, and his credit cards were maxed out. For the first time in his life, Nate had to face actual consequences. He couldn't qualify for new credit cards or loans because his existing debt was too high, and he had no income history. His electricity got shut off for 3 days in the middle of winter because he couldn't pay the bill. A week into this financial drought, Nate called me. "Look, man, I know we've had our differences, but I'm in a serious bind here. Could you loan me some cash until this blows over? I'll pay you back." "Sorry, no," I replied. "My finances are tied up in legal fees recovering what was stolen from me and Caddy." "Come on, I'm about to be evicted. Sounds like a problem you should solve yourself. Target's hiring." The silence on the other end was deafening before he hung up. A month after the lawsuit was filed, Allison and I had our smaller, more intimate wedding. 50 guests instead of 200. My dad attended solo and was respectful throughout the event. Caddy was there with her boyfriend. Nate and my mom were nowhere to be seen, exactly as planned. Derek was my best man and managed to keep things light despite everything. His toast included a line about how he'd never seen a man dodge so many bullets from his own family and still come out ahead. Everyone who knew the situation laughed harder than they probably should have. The court case was settled before it went to trial. My parents agreed to a structured repayment plan that wouldn't leave them homeless but would require them to sell their vacation property and downsize significantly. Their lake house in northern Michigan sold for less than they paid for it. They had to move from their 4,000 square foot house into a 1,200 square foot condo in a neighborhood they used to mock. My dad's prize boat was one of the first things they had to sell to make the initial payments. The remaining trust funds were placed under the control of a neutral third-party trustee with strict distribution guidelines. According to the new arrangement, I would receive my full share immediately since I was over 30 and married. Caddy would get hers when she turned 30 in a few years. Nate's portion would remain in trust until he either turned 30 or showed proof of legitimate employment for at least 12 consecutive months. Nate was furious when he found out he wouldn't have immediate access to his share of the inheritance. "That money is rightfully mine," he texted me. "1/3 of it is," I replied. "And you'll get it according to the original terms of Grandpa's will. For education, legitimate business plans with oversight, or when you turn 30, no more blank checks." Once the judge approved the settlement, my share was released immediately. It was surreal to see that much money in my account, $397,000 after legal fees and tax considerations. Caddy would get about the same when she turned 30. The remainder of the trust, including Nate's portion, was worth approximately $450,000, with some of that earmarked for repaying what my parents had already spent. The first thing I did was pay off our mortgage. The second was to fund a proper honeymoon for Allison and me. 2 weeks in New Zealand, all expenses paid, first-class flights. The third was to establish my own investment portfolio, something my grandfather would have approved of. I didn't mention the money to Nate. As far as he knew, everything was still tied up in legal proceedings. Let him sweat a little longer. It's been 6 months since the lawsuit was settled, and we relocated to Atlanta as planned. Allison is thriving in her new position, and I've been promoted to lead architect at my company. We bought a house in a nice suburb and are finally enjoying some peace and quiet. Our new place is everything we wanted. 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a backyard big enough for a dog. We adopted a German Shepherd mix from the local shelter and named him Rocket. He's smart as hell and already knows a dozen commands. Allison jokes that he listens better than any of my family members ever did. My parents have been sending emails and texts almost daily, alternating between apologies, updates on their progress with Nate, and not-so-subtle hints that they'd love to visit Atlanta sometime. I respond occasionally but maintain firm boundaries. We had to renew the restraining order once before our move, but we didn't since we're now states away. My dad calls once a month, usually to update me on their finances, tight but manageable, and his therapy progress, slow but steady. He's learning to recognize his enabling patterns and working on setting boundaries with my mom and Nate. The most surprising development has been Nate. With his financial safety net gone, he finally got a job at a local tech store. According to Caddy, who still talks to him occasionally, he's actually sticking with it. Working regular hours and earning his own money seems to be changing his perspective. Last month, he sent me an email that caught me off guard. "Been thinking about everything. That proposal nonsense was messed up. I see that now. Wasn't even about Allison. I was just jealous you had your life together while I was a complete mess. Mom and Dad made it way too easy for me to be a screw-up and I took advantage. That's on me. Not asking for forgiveness. Just wanted you to know things look different when you're not living in Fantasyland. Working actual hours for actual paychecks has been eye-opening. Tell Allison I'm sorry for being a jerk. You guys didn't deserve any of that." I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process it. After discussing it with Allison, I sent a brief reply. "Thanks for the apology. It means something. Good luck with the job." Last week, I received a package from my hometown. Inside was a check for $500 with a note first installment on what I owe you. Not much, but it's a start. The amount was laughable compared to what had been taken from my trust, but the gesture wasn't lost on me. It was the first time in his life Nate had actually taken responsibility for anything. My mom still doesn't get it. Her latest email included the line, "I don't understand why you're still punishing us when Nate has clearly moved on." She doesn't realize this was never about punishment. It was about accountability. She continues sending passive-aggressive emails. Last month, she sent a long email about how everyone makes mistakes and how real families forgive each other. I forwarded it to Derek, who replied with a single gif of a man playing the world's smallest violin. My dad seems to be slowly coming around. He started therapy and recently sent me an email acknowledging his role in enabling Nate and neglecting me and Caddy. "I was a coward," he wrote. "It was easier to give in to your mother and Nate than to stand up for what was right. I failed you as a father and I'm trying to be better." Caddy visits us in Atlanta every few months. She's engaged now and planning a destination wedding in Hawaii next year. She's invited Nate but not our parents. Her choice and I respect it. She and her fiancé, a pediatric surgeon she met at the hospital, are looking at houses near us in Atlanta. The idea of having my sister close by again feels like getting back something I lost years ago. The inheritance from my grandfather has changed our financial landscape completely. Allison and I have set up college funds for our future kids and invested in a vacation property in the North Carolina mountains. We're careful with the money, no luxury cars or designer clothes, but it's a tremendous relief to have that financial cushion. As for me and Allison, we're doing better than ever. The distance from my family drama has been healing for both of us. We're talking about starting a family.